Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest Leadership at the Edge conversation. This series is all about exploring the ways that we are individually and collectively up against the edges of our knowledge, our certainty, our comfort zone in the way that we lead, whether that's leading ourselves, our careers, an organization. Today, I'm really excited to dive in today. We are with the amazing Julie Fedele. Now, let me know if I have any of this wrong in your title collection. Venture builder, coach, speaker, founder of Polywork, portfolio career builder, and certainly someone who has experience inside corporate building and also building outside of corporate for yourself and helping other people do that. Is that
Yes,
fair? Did I
that's a
miss
good
anything?
summary. No,
Okay, great.
thank you.
Amazing. So the broad theme that we have here is the future of work is personal. Now, if you've been on one of these conversations before, you know that this is unscripted. We go where we want to go. We follow the cues from you as well. So for those of you watching live, if you have come with a particular curiosity, with a particular question or something that you would really like to know for yourself or maybe somebody else, drop that into chat and let us know, and we will pick up those themes and prioritize those themes. This idea that the future of work is personal,
Mm,
to me, part of what that really means is right now is the perfect time to get really clear on the value that we bring in work, not the title or the label or the framework or the accreditation, but the value that we really bring
mm,
and the way that we really want to relate to work. So I think about ourselves in a relationship with work, and we want to love that relationship and we want to feel loved in that relationship.
mm,
Uh, and we really want that reciprocity happening.
mm,
So if we think about the future is personal, we're taking this lens of, what value do I bring? What do I want in return? And we put that in the context of the current environment where structures are changing in terms of corporate structures, the way that work operates, we're engaging in things commercially, and opportunity shifting. I guess part of the provocation here is that it's those of us who take radical responsibility
mm.
for our value and agency over our careers that will make the most of that particular moment. So, with that in mind, Julie, very keen to dive in. I've had a lot of conversations with executives, senior leaders, founders, both in coaching conversations and in my network generally. And this is something that I hear a lot of, whether it's people who are in corporate and want to stay in corporate, but know that things are moving around them
Mm,
and they're curious about, well, what does this mean for me? Then there are people who are very successful in corporate who know that at some point in the
mm,
midterm, near to midterm, they want to do something different, but have zero idea about how. We've got these different kind of places on the map at the moment, but there's very much a curiosity. So if you are watching, stick with that curiosity and
mhm,
listen to what is being shared, the conversation, potentially debate that we're having with that lens of inquisitiveness. How might this be challenging you? What might the invitation for you be? How might it apply to your world or your team or your organization? That is way too much from me. So, Julie, a hand over to you. Uh, let's kick it off with the usual opening question. Can you tell us about a time when you've been up against the edge in your own leadership? What did that look like? How did you navigate it?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for having me, Andrea. I just want to talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, I am in the car. This has been an edge for me this morning. We have some technology issues, hence the interesting background. That was like an edge for me this morning. But I
Yeah.
guess in my own career, For me, it was really the moment where I realized I had spent nearly 2 decades climbing this ladder. I was in private equity, I was in an executive role, and on paper, I had every box ticked. And what I realized was that I was completely unhappy, unfulfilled, and it actually wasn't challenging me or pushing me to be
Mm.
the leader I wanted to be. So I had an incredible team, but because I was so unhappy in the context itself, I wasn't showing up in the best light. And so for me, that was really a moment where I had to think about, well, what does self leadership look like, and what does a different type
Mm.
of work look like for me? And because I love working, but I just couldn't figure out like what context did I want to show up in.
Yeah. How did you figure out the answer to that?
I mean, I went through quite a number of years. I say this all the time. Like, if people who read my Substack, etc., I'm always talking about like this began for me in 2017. So it's nearly been a 10-year journey, which is shocking because I can't believe how time flies. And it really
Does.
started to a lot of what you were saying earlier with reshaping my point of what I called a breakdown into more of a curiosity. So instead of saying like, oh my gosh, I spent all of this time climbing a ladder and it's leaning against the wrong wall, I decided to get really curious about, well, what wall do I want to be climbing if I want to climb at all?
Mm-hmm.
What work genuinely lights me up? So I talk really about tapping into your understanding of self and figuring out like what feels expansive and what feels really contractive.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found out through a series of experimentation, because that's what I do in my own life and with all of my clients, is really understanding, well, instead of trying to, completely change our whole lives and say everything has to be perfect, what experiments can I conduct to get moments of evidence so I know whether I'm on the right track? And so I started doing that. And one of the first things I did was, firstly, I spent more than a year really understanding myself and working through burnout. So I didn't try to really start anything new. I
Yeah.
just sat with the uncomfortable feeling of my engine isn't turning back on and I need to just give myself time to pause. So what I did in that time is I actually resigned a really big role that I was in, and I took a somewhat of a step down just to help myself recover, but still earn money and still be in the
Mm.
game. And then I started to figure out, well, what if I could do something else and develop income streams? Like, what does that actually look like? And it was all around supporting. I loved business building, and that's what I'd done for 20 years, but I didn't want to do it in the context of an organization. I wanted to support individuals and women in particular to reimagine their lives and build businesses. And that's kind of where I landed. And I started experimenting from there.
Yeah. I love hearing about the introspection and understanding self element here.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, a little bit of bias, ex-psychologist, that, who is the human in this equation, and kind of this
Mm.
real who am I and who
Mm.
do I want to be question, putting that front and center is so powerful and a little countercultural in a way, because generally speaking, we're in this consumerist machine,
Mm.
which is all about the haves, all about the outcomes, all about whether it's the lifestyle or the label or the position or the title or
Yes.
the size
Yeah.
of anything. We see those as very tangible indicators and hence grasp onto wanting them. And many of us, particularly early career, I think, swallow that
Oh, for sure.
idea or that story or that definition of success, which is not a failing, it just is, right? We
Mm.
latch onto that certainty and forget about, well, who am I? And is that actually something that I will enjoy? And then if we layer in the experimentation lens, the only way we're going to figure out what we actually enjoy is to run a series of experiments. And
Yep.
work life to any particular point. in Korea is essentially a bunch of experiments. I took a whole bunch of experiments
Mm,
to get from initial consulting career to here. None of them are the wrong path. They're just different. And they, to your point, I think they give you insight and
yeah.
data that you can then make choices from.
Yeah, and everything that you said there just resonates so much. And I collect different points of data. So some of it was what I call energetic data. So what really
Yeah.
expands me. So I really understood self. Then I
Mm.
took that, evidence of like, do I have the capability and skill sets to actually do the thing I want to do? And some of it was true. And then I figured out, well, I have some what I call like expansion areas that I need to fill. So
Mm.
how might I then go and expand into those? And then I also look at market data. So does my energy and what I really want to do match with the capabilities I have, and is there market demand? Because if we think about that as a Venn diagram, like that's the perfect mix of where we, have something we can actually be paid for. And I think that a
Mm.
lot of us sometimes, we say, I just want to do this thing, or my clients come to me like, I just want to do this. And I'm like, okay, great. But have we got all of the pieces of information to understand, like, is this an income we can monetize? And is it something that you can scale, or do you just want to genuinely do it on the side and not be your core income? So those are the types of things
Mm.
that I've just conducted it. Basically, I turned all of my training of business building onto me and said, well, how would I coach someone or how would I mentor someone through this process? And I kind of
Mm.
followed my own process of how I supported founders when I was building businesses with them.
Yes. And I hear in that a recognition of a transferable skill, to use,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of language. It's like, here's something that I can do. What happens if I turn that skill or that strength and point it in a different direction?
Yeah.
And that can be useful in, yes, building our career and building our relationship with work and the form that our work takes. It's also really useful with any strength that you have anywhere.
Mm,
Yeah, if I'm really great building relationships with external stakeholders, maybe I can turn those skills and actually build relationships with my peers or build relationships with my team,
correct. Yes.
as an example. From somebody that I worked with a little while ago. Like, but how do we recognize what we're good at and point it in a different direction, and balancing that with areas,
Yeah.
lovely language, sounds really potent.
Yeah, so I went through this process where I developed, and I actually was inspired to develop it from when I was in I used to work at a tech consultancy, and it was a software engineering firm, and each of us had something called this honeycomb of capabilities.
Mm.
And so when basically you would do an assessment and they would light up each honeycomb and say, well, Julie, if you wanted this to be a complete set, we would need to get these types of skills into your honeycomb. And so
Yeah.
what I did is I actually really leveraged that framework and I built my own. And so what I think most of us do is when we're looking to make a change, we think we have to build everything new
Mm.
versus excavate our skill set and put it into different domains. Like, what industry domain experience do I have? What human skills do I have? And that can be like internal selling, stakeholder management, being personable. Well, what technology and AI types of skills do I have? And then you
Mm.
build that out slowly to have a picture of who you are. And then you say, okay, well, I've done the excavation, or what I call career archaeology. And then it's like, well, how can I transmute these into a series of experiments where I can see, well, does the market actually want this?
Mm.
And I mean, may sound like a lot of words, but I do, in my experience doing this over the last 6 or 7 years with people, I feel like we really discount our skills from the past because we can't see them. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually call this the translation problem. And it's not because we're not good at communicating or having a conversation. It's just we've been in corporate speak for so long, we forget all of the things we've actually done. And so,
Yes.
your ability to internally sell an idea is directly translatable to a sellable skill. Like you can sell, that means you can sell something out to the market, but you've never phrased it like that in your mind because you've never had
Mm,
to.
mm. I had a conversation with an executive recently in a coaching conversation, in a coaching context, and she had built a very successful career off the back of this framework and this skill and human-centered design and all of these different
Yes.
things. And we were leaning into a new edge in her leadership with the organization that she's in and what the team needed. And she was saying to me, oh, maybe I need to go and do this accreditation then, Andrea, so I can build this skill. Maybe is there a framework or a model that you can give me around this? And the moment that she realized that actually I don't need all of that, I've got enough. And what I need to do is show up and be myself and give these people my
Mm,
attention and my presence and my understanding and my empathy, which isn't a head-based thing. It's a very human-based
mm,
thing. It was like she was actually crying in that particular moment, but
mm.
it was just quite a cathartic realization. And I feel like there's a connection here with what you're sharing around what we've been taught to value and the
Yeah.
labels we've given things, um, and how we kind of take back ownership over some of that.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of this work is identity work, and you would be
Yeah.
really familiar with this because even with like, let's talk about AI. Why so many of us are just thinking like, what is going to happen to me as a knowledge worker? Because AI can systematize and almost do, not almost, it does it much better than I could do it. So where
Mm.
does that leave me? And a lot of that is identity work. So really understanding, well, if I don't do all of this busy work, what is the value I can actually extract and deliver to the world? And that's a
Mm.
completely different question to ask yourself than we've been taught in when we were in university, when we were graduates, when we were in,
Yeah.
in our corporate career. Like it's totally flipping that whole conversation on its head. And it is something that just doesn't happen overnight. We've all consumed this story of what success looks like. So it's going to take us a minute to really reimagine what a different path could be for
Mm.
ourselves. And I think we've all got to give ourselves time as well, right? Like it's not going to happen overnight. It's a process of unwinding and seeing ourselves in a different shape.
Yes. Particularly when we consider like none of us are just doing this one thing. There are a whole bunch of other parts of our lives, parts
Yeah.
of our work, but also the broader life at play. You've mentioned AI. We've got a question from Liam on the AI angle. So he's
Hmm.
asking, do you think with the rise of AI, that there has now been a pendulum swing back to a greater focus on the person after dehumanization that AI caused initially?
That's a really great question. Listen, personally, I'm going to answer that in two ways. So, firstly, I never believed the AI hype, like what organizations were saying, I'm going to get rid of 20,000 people because
Mm.
AI, I mean, firstly, the technology is far too early for us to know if it can deliver that return on investment. That was a pure play on pleasing shareholders. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Also, back in 2005, I'm showing my age now, I was a part of a whole range of digital transformations
Yeah.
when a very similar promise was said sold to the market that we're going to transform all of these organizations to digital organizations and we're going to have less workforce and it's going to be streamlined. And actually I was a part of one of Australia's largest transformations where we got rid of all of the software engineers and most of the marketing team, and
Mm.
within 18 months we had hired them all back as contractors on super high day rates. This happened in 2005. I experienced it in 2010. I experienced it again in 2014 and then in 2019. Similar types of, and now we're experiencing it again. So
Yeah.
I'm always one to look at history and say, listen, this didn't just happen in the last 25 years with technology. Accountants experienced this when the, calculator was invented, their whole world was flipped upside down. So I think that there is a lot of hype around AI, and we're slowly starting to see Well, what does it actually mean for how you partner with AI in an organization to elevate the human? And I think we're starting to hear that conversation now. With the research that I'm doing, a lot of it is around how the human partners with the AI to produce better work, but it's not reducing human need. It's actually, in some cases, increasing it.
Mm.
And so I'm excited to have more of that conversation. But for the moment, I think there's a lot of the return on investment types of conversation, which I feel like will start to dissipate, and we'll start to see, like, how can we really partner with this technology?
Yes. How can we use it to create value rather than
Yeah.
just do some things? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a really great organization. They're a media company. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. They shared a fantastic article last week, and it was all around how they've automated their workflows and how they're using AI in their organization. And they show, and I encourage everyone, I can share the link, I encourage everyone to read it. And it was really demonstrating how they're an AI first organization, and they've actually said, we need more humans, not less.
Mm.
And what we're automating is is the junk work, right? It's the
Mm.
meetings about meetings, it's the emails that we haven't caught up on. And it's actually called, behavioral economists call this type of meetings about meetings work sludge. So it's
Yeah.
automating the sludge and then figuring out how we partner with, whether it is a really intelligently trained bot, to improve and enhance our human work and deliver even more exceptional outcomes. But that doesn't necessarily mean less humans.
No.
It just means a different shape of how we conduct our work.
And what I love in that is essentially we're saying, how can we leverage the technology to dial down the noise so we can hone in on the signal so that we can protect our focus and so that we can elevate to the point where we're doing the work that we're best placed to do instead of
Mm.
being pulled down into this busy work, this not productive work, but the stuff that really grinds our soul and triggers
Yeah.
our nervous system.
And is the reason why most people are unhappy in corporate. So if you really, so I'll give myself as an example. I loved building businesses. I was in private equity and in venture for most of my career, and software engineering, building new products with software engineers. I loved the core content of my role. But
Mm.
as I progressed and as I became more senior and I reached the C suite, I did not spend any time on the tools or actually building the thing.
Yeah.
I just spent time managing the board, managing the executive team, managing my peers because they were trying to take this and they were upset at each other. It was just sludge. And when I stepped into working for myself, all like the full time, I realized that I reconnected with my craft and I loved building businesses, and all of that
Mm.
sludge was removed. And
So
so
good.
and what I think is that if we partner correctly with this technology, we could really start to see people hone more in their craft and build more mastery. And I think that's what we're all craving, right? To
Mm.
build more mastery and actually build something of value versus being in back-to-back meetings for 8 hours, because no nervous system can deal with that.
No.
And
And
so
look,
I'm quite an
nobody loves
optimist.
it.
No, and I hope I answered Liam's question. I'm happy to have a follow-up, but I I think that we have been sold a really negative story on this technology. And I really am optimistic to think about how we could potentially use it and partner with it and reimagine our organizations and roles for it to
Yeah.
be more fulfilling, not just for the human, but also deliver the outcomes the organization needs.
Yes. And if we think about what it takes to have a really well-crafted role, one that gives us a sense of meaning and fulfillment, We want to feel like we're using our strengths. We need to feel like we're actually contributing in some
Mm,
way amongst a whole suite of other factors. But this idea of crafting a role that really works for us, whether it's in corporate or outside of corporate, we're learning
mm,
so much more about what it takes to do that and do that really
mm,
well. AI is potentially one factor driving the necessity to consider that with more intentionality. Choosing to step outside of corporate and build in a different way is another way that we can
mm.
start to think about, or another instigation point, I guess, to get
Yeah,
us to think about, well, what is this experience of what actually need to look like? What do I want from my relationship with work?
yeah.
And I love that you're pulling it into this meaning piece. And what a lot of my network and clients are starting to talk about as well, what is the legacy that I'm leaving behind? I
Mm,
don't want to, be here in this busy role, in this big title, doing these important things, and kind of not feel like I have contributed in a way that might exist beyond me, which is a way of looking at meaning.
mm. Yeah. And I don't know if this is where this is a tangent, but as you were talking, I kept on getting the term individual contributor coming into the IC model. This is very popular in tech, being an individual contributor to a product team. And essentially, why I think what I think the model of the future of work could be. So you talked about you can be in corporate or you can step out of corporate, but I'm also seeing a world where it's a hybrid.
Mm,
So, how might we really reimagine the way we work to potentially we could have one thread of our portfolio working in an organization, either as an individual contributor, directly contributing using our craft to an initiative, or we could be leading a team on a fractional basis. And then in other threads of our portfolio, we could take that and support individuals, or we could teach or coach or speak or develop our own tech products. Like there is in no universe that I thought, because I'm a failed software engineer, like I'm literally couldn't, I failed computer science in my first year of university, so I had to swap my degree. But I've been able to now with AI build my own platform and
so cool.
career redesign platform. And I just thought to myself, this is such a wonderful ability and thread to my portfolio, which now then I can leverage what I'm learning and bring it into organizations, right? So I just don't feel like it's either or. I just feel
Mm,
like there's this more expansive view of work and how we participate in it. And I don't think it's a binary conversation. So when people
mm,
come to me and say, oh, I hate corporate and I want to get out of corporate, and I'm like, listen, I hear you. I was there. I never thought I'd want to go back into corporate. But actually, as I've detangled my identity and really understood myself, I see a wonderful value of being able to work with in a group of people around other humans delivering something together, as
yeah.
well as being able to have my own individual income streams where I'm supporting people. And I think
Mm.
that's the model we're moving to more and more.
And you, I believe, have called this the Hollywood model. Am I correct
Yes.
here? Yes.
Yes.
So, can you expand a little bit with that analogy, I suppose? One of my
Yeah.
dear friends has been working not in Hollywood, but in reality TV since the very first
Yeah.
season of Big Brother. She's spent decades in this freelance but very kind of niche industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see the way that you talk about the Hollywood model very much playing out in how she comes into teams, out of
Mm-hmm.
teams, how the super connectors kind of pull people
Yes.
in, and those kind of collectives get built to execute on a project and then
Yes.
disband. So tell me about the Hollywood model.
Yes. So I wasn't the first to coin it in this context, so I just want to put that out. But
Okay.
I have built on the whole concept. So I'll talk about how I see individuals participating in this new frame of work, and then I can tell you about how I see the organization adapting to it.
Perfect.
So essentially, firstly, we all know that Hollywood doesn't operate perfectly. That's a lot of criticism I get. I'm like, I'm not suggesting it's a perfect model. I'm suggesting that it's an analogy for how
Yeah.
I believe we're going to work in the future. So if you think about how a Hollywood movie gets made, you have a producer who comes in and actually sets the terms of the project and says, we want to make this movie. It's kind of like the CEO of the whole production. And then
Mhm.
they bring in directors, cinematographers, makeup artists, and then talent. And so when I think about what they do, they come together for a certain period of time. They're very focused. They have an outcome they all know they have to deliver. They deliver that and then they disband. And they
Mm.
disband with this new movie as part of their highlight reel. And they can really demonstrate this outcome that they've delivered.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the future of work, and if we think the OECD predicts that over 50% of people are going to have portfolio careers by 2030, I'm like, well, a lot of how a portfolio career works is similar to a Hollywood movie set. So if
Yes.
you think about it, there's going to be more as organizations shrink in size because they are tending to shrink with full-time people.
Yeah.
They're still going to need to execute projects. So they'll go out to the market and say, I've got this. They'll have a producer and say, I've got to go cast my talent. And they'll go to different strategic networks and collectives and say, oh, I need this product designer from this group, and I'll need this project manager and this software engineer, and they'll create a team to deliver a specific project. They'll do that for 6, 12, whatever, how many months, and then they'll disband. And what they disband with is not a line item on their CV, but more of what I call like a career reel of outcomes that they've delivered versus a set of responsibilities. So that's how the individual participates in that. How I see the organization participating in this new Hollywood model is they have to really reimagine how they manage talent.
Mm.
So the head of talent will no longer be internally focused, managing succession plans and identifying talent pipelines within the organization. There'll be more of an outward focused role. So the head of talent will be the casting director, and it'll really need to be able to create all of these networks outside of the organization. So when they understand a project's coming down the pipeline, they'll be able to get the right resources into the organization to deliver that project.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a really different way of thinking for a company too. So I'm having a lot of conversations with organizations saying, if you really want to work with the flexible workforce and
Yeah.
the individual contributor, you need to really, you don't have 5 months to get them understanding the tacit ways of being of the organization. They need to walk in working. They need to understand the culture in day one. They need to understand the
Mm-hmm.
outcomes they're delivering. They have to figure out what the system of work is within days versus months.
Mm.
And so that is a lot different of how a leadership comes together and understands what work needs to be done and then how to execute it versus what we experience today. Because you
Yes.
have a team of people there for 40, 50 hours a week. So you can kind of be lazy in your communication because you're like, oh, I'll just tap Julie up and she can execute this for me. But what about if Julie's not there full time and she's a fractional worker? You have to be very clear with the outcomes you're suggesting that these people do because they're not there for 40, 50 hours a week. They might be there for 2 days a week.
Mm. Which sounds a lot like really hone in on the key priorities, be really clear about the value that we're trying to create, what good looks like. So set the standards, have the communication structured in a way
Hmm.
that actually is proactive rather than reactive or
Hmm.
instantaneous, this kind of in the moment. And regardless of where you think we're going to land from a structure point of view, those things, whilst they might feel like some heavy lifting up front, those things make anything easier. Though, like it makes
100%.
so much. makes us so much more productive. So leadership skills that you're never going to regret building, being able to define what the standard is, being able to get really clear on what the deliverable is, being able to kind of wrap people around that and get them to lean into that
It, it,
sounds.
it's almost, it's like it's a I really believe it's a non-negotiable for the future of work. And where I actually experienced this was I worked, as I said, for a software consulting company. They were called ThoughtWorks, like one of the best
Mm,
roles, expansive roles I've ever had, because they were that some of that organization were the fathers of Agile, right? Like
right.
they were actually a part of the mandate of what Agile was and is, and they promoted it. And when I was working with those engineers, they really taught me how important upfront it is to understand what the ways of working, the system of
Mm,
work, and having the same shape in your head of what product you're building.
yeah.
And so a lot of what I'm drawing on is like we used to spend 5 or 6 days with a client up front in a room for 8 hours figuring out like, what do you mean when you say that? What do you mean when you say that? And we spent that time up front, but then it just supercharged the work in the
Yes.
back end.
Yeah. It's like a
And
slingshot. You kind of like pull it
correct.
back to really catapult forward.
And what happens when your workforce is made up of full-time people, fractional people, individual contributors, and then non-human team members?
Yeah.
That is a whole different leadership capability and skill set we need to think about. And it's something I'm really excited about because I think it is such a reimagination of how we work, not just as individuals, but also within the organization.
There's so much potential in
Yeah, I think
that.
so.
It sounds exciting to me. I realize for others it's potentially a little more challenging. All right. We've explored a range of different angles here, and I'm really conscious that we could continue talking for a really
Yeah.
long time, but it's probably time to pull some of these threads together. Um, Thinking about the notes that we've hit in this conversation so far, Julie, what is one thing that you would encourage leaders to ponder or try this week?
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
I always love to begin with curiosity. So, is there a thread in your own leadership or in your own skill set or something that you're looking to expand in that you want to investigate and experiment with?
Yeah.
And if you've been sitting on it a while, like that's an interesting curiosity too.
Hmm.
Why is that? And I would encourage everyone to tune into to their bodies and say, like, is it an edge of growth? Am I fearful about something? And start exploring that way. Because I really believe that life leaves you breadcrumbs,
Hmm.
and all those little tiny things that arise in your mind as an area you can expand in are there for a reason. And so I would encourage everyone to get curious and start experimenting.
Love that. Anyone who's talking about curiosity is speaking my language. Uh, so, to everyone watching live or the replay, thank you for leaning in with curiosity. I'm curious about what has stood out to you, what questions you might have off the back of this, what might have resonated. So drop something into the comments or the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that over the next couple of hours or days as well. So if you have a question from watching the replay, leave it there and we'll do our best to come back to you. A couple of things that are sitting with me from this conversation. Look, the Hollywood model analogy really resonates and lands for me, and I hope it does for others as well. But part of what I think that does is give us a schema or an
Mm,
example of what an alternative might look like. And that helps us follow the breadcrumbs and lean
mm,
into some different possibilities. We started quite early talking about knowing yourself and this excavation, this archaeology of who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I really enjoy? What lights me up? What am I actually genuinely good at? That is paramount. And if there was one thing I suggest anyone do in that space, go and think of 5 people who know you well and who you trust and ask
mm.
them, how would you describe me in 5 words?
Yeah.
Or Or the slightly more value-oriented alternative is, yeah, what are the 2 or 3 things that you just see I'm so good at?
Yeah.
And collect all of that, 'cause sometimes we can't see it ourselves as this unconscious competence or genius.
Mm.
Try it, let me know. And then this identity work. You touched on this, Julie, at the outset, and I think there's a thread here through the whole conversation, how we see ourselves, the role we see us playing in our careers, like that needs to continue to evolve if our relationship with work is to continue to
Hmm.
evolve. And one of the disservices I think we do ourselves, based off a lot of different conversations with some very amazing, successful people, is we put our flag in the ground and then we think we need to keep it there for forever and we
Hmm.
can't evolve or iterate beyond that without making that first thing wrong or a mistake. And so please don't fall into that sort of trail of thinking. Identity is one of the core pillars that I see as essential here.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly.
All right. Thank you, Julie, so much for joining us, for persisting with the tech. Lovely of you to
Thank you.
take the time in your car. Thank you to everyone watching and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you so much.